Welcome back to Melanin Meets Mental Health. I'm Jasmine J. Thank you for joining me again for the episode Us. If you haven't already checked out my introductory episode, please stop and check that out now so you can get a better understanding of my background, my experience, and basically just who I am as a person. So I would prefer you go back and you check that out and then revisit this video. If you are intending to follow me on this journey with Melanin Meets Mental Health, and there's anything that you feel like you may be able to pull, you should have a journal available. So I have this notes journal. It's a very basic, simple journal that I got from Target. You should definitely keep a notebook with you as you watch any episode of Melanin Meets Mental Health, because as something resonates with you, it's important that you write it down right then and there. And of course, journaling is something that's very therapeutic, that is very beneficial for working through and figuring out some of the things. It could be a journal from the 99-cent store. It could be a sheet of paper, whatever works for you. So why am I doing an episode titled Us? I am very much aware of the mental health that's going on within our community. In a lot of cases within our community, we tend to keep things within the household, and I'm trying to address that stigma. I'm trying to make you feel a lot more comfortable embracing your mental health. You don't have to participate. You don't have to put or say anything, you don't have to put yourself out there. That's what I'm doing. I'm putting myself out there for you guys so that you guys feel more comfortable talking about what diagnoses you experience, how you work through those experiences, so that we can all help others. So let's just open the conversation. So I titled this episode Us because it's really important that we normalize people who have these disorders who are not willing to acknowledge. It just always comes from a negative space. Whenever I hear someone talking about mental health, whether it's on TV, at a meeting that I'm at, or just overall in general how we discuss mental health, is usually this heavy weight, this heavy dark subject. As someone who suffers from bipolar disorder, I can tell you that as someone that is a part of the community, we receive our disorders in a variety of ways. So you might have someone who is not accepting of their diagnoses, no ifs, ands, or buts. I refuse to get services, that I've been coping just fine the way I've been coping my whole life. B, you might have somebody who is very accepting of their diagnoses. They embrace their diagnoses. They live in their truth. They do whatever it is possible to manage their diagnoses and just want to lead a fully functioning life, knowing that they have a disorder that's going to acquire some extra attention. And then you have people who don't know that they're suffering from PTSD, anxiety, or depression. You have people within our community who are not let's say exposed to mental health and what that looks like. Seeing or losing friends to gun violence. It's not normal for you to lose a friend at 14, 15 to gun violence. That is life, but it's not normal for you to see that, especially if it was someone that was close to you. It's not normal for you to see that. It's not normal for you to receive that information, grieve the way you grieve, and then supposedly move forward. It's really important that you start to think about maybe speaking to someone who specializes in bereavement or depression. And whenever I mention a clinical term or anything of that nature, I will definitely reference it either in the description box or on the actual video down here below. As someone who suffers from bipolar disorder, I've been showing symptoms of depression since maybe 14 years old. I don't know what triggered my depression at 14 years old, but I have been depressed ever since. When you're an adolescent, people tend to think you're going through a phase, so I don't think anyone else caught on to what I was going through. And then when I went to college, I remember going to classes, being very tuned out, being very depressed, making it to class at at the very last minute because it was difficult for me to get out of bed. But I've always been high functioning, which is why I was able to complete my academia and graduate on time and move forward. But when I was going through these things, I knew something wasn't right. I was a psychology major. I'm learning new things, and some things are resonating with me. Like, hey, I think maybe like that's what this is. I'm depressed. Just kind of like dawned on me that there's something more to this. It's not just a phase, and it's something that I really need to address. So I do remember going to the student health center. I do remember what that process was like. And I remember that I went through the intake process, and before I even saw a therapist, I dropped out. I was sitting in the waiting room for just a little bit too long. I was already anxious. I was already in, somewhat in denial about my depression and my anxiety. So when I saw an opportunity to address it, I took it. But I also was ambivalent about receiving services or even acknowledging what I was going through. So the moment I had the opportunity to walk out of there with no questions asked, that's exactly what I did. When I went to NYU, exact same thing. Still at this point have not addressed my depression or anxiety and have isolated myself socially. I'm keeping to myself. I'm believing that, hey, this is just the type of person that I am. Very very chill. I'm just kind of vibing to my own beat. NYU Wellness Center. That was a little bit more successful than the first time that I tried to get services. NYU intake process was very smooth, as was Howard's. I was able to see a therapist. And because I was constantly on campus throughout the day, going back and forth to classes, it was easy for me to set up an appointment that was in between, when I had a break between my classes, to just kind of run in, be assigned to a therapist, meet with the therapist, and then start the therapeutic process. Psychotherapy requires you to reflect on your past experiences and why you are experiencing some of the things that you are today. I do know with working with clients, a lot of them will tell me that they were involved in services at one point and that they just simply dropped out, maybe second or third session. And when I ask them why, a lot of the times the response is, it wasn't working for me. She was asking me too many personal questions. I don't know this lady. It wasn't doing anything for me. You're just getting me angry. You're just irritating me because you're bringing up old stuff. Okay, that's understandable. It can be frustrating, especially if you have a traumatic past, but that is how you work through it, by acknowledging it, by talking about it, by developing coping mechanisms to address it. Pause, time out. I realized that as I was editing the video, I didn't realize that I really didn't go into depth on what defense mechanisms are and what coping mechanisms are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the link to my video where I go a little bit more into depth on defense mechanisms and coping mechanisms and give you guys some examples. So if you feel like you need a better understanding, just click below and continue. It's very beneficial. It just so happens that at the time I was not ready to receive that information, and that's okay. You may not be ready yourself. Someone watching this, a viewer watching this right now, may not feel that they are ready, but that they know something is wrong and just aren't ready to actually act on it. That's okay. At the age of 26, I have gotten to a place where I am accepting of my diagnoses. Being a part of different groups where I'm surrounded by other people who have the same diagnoses that I have, and seeing how they manage their disorder has been nothing short of inspiring. You have people who are very saddened to know that they're suffering from such and such, and then you have people who are relieved to be able to put a name to what it is that they're experiencing, and you have people who just tell jokes all day long, making fun of themselves, and I love it. I love that someone is able to say, hey, this is what it is, and this is who I am, and I'm going to be as happy as I can about it. Receiving it through comedy, it gives them an opportunity to think about whatever their issue is and to process it. So us social workers like to use something called the 5 stages of change. And what that is it's originally something that we use for clients who are suffering from substance abuse. What I did was I took the 5 stages of change and I kind of tweaked it a bit to make it more relatable for mental health. So what I'm going to do for our episode today is discuss the 5 stages of change. This is a really important episode that I would like, if you are going to follow my channel, I would really like for you to know what stage of change do you fall into, because that's going to be very important to how you receive the information that we discuss. The 5 stages of change are pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, relapse. And I don't want you to think of relapse, only associate relapse with substance abuse. And I'll explain more about it. You might be asking yourself, well, that sounds about 6. The pre-contemplation stage. So people in this stage are not necessarily thinking seriously about changing or maybe even acknowledging that they need to engage in mental health services, despite concrete and abstract evidence that suggests otherwise. So for the very first stage, the pre-contemplation stage. If you're in the pre-contemplation stage, you're not thinking seriously about changing or acknowledging the need for mental health treatment. Depending on if you recognize your mental health and its impact on your activities, your day-to-day activities, your interpersonal relationships, you may not see a problem let alone a problem that needs to be addressed, right? So you are considered to be in the pre-contemplation stage, and you definitely don't see an issue that needs to be addressed. Stage 2, the contemplation stage. So in the contemplation stage, people in this stage are able to consider the possibility of obtaining mental health treatment, but feel some level of ambivalence about taking that next step. On the one hand, you might have someone that has made it this long without treatment, and you remain stuck between the decision to obtain services or continuing without. On the other hand, you may have started to experience some consequences, which may include your emotional and mental wellness, your personal, psychological, physical. Perhaps you've developed some coping mechanisms that you may not even be aware of. I know for a lot of people that may be substance use, like marijuana. For other people, it could be journaling. It could be expressing yourself through art. So during the contemplation stage, you are aware that there are some concerns that need to be addressed, but you are not ready to take that next step. If you're contemplating getting mental health services, pat yourself on the back and give yourself credit for that, because some people aren't even able to acknowledge that they have something that needs to be addressed. So if you've made it to the second stage, kudos to you. So for the third stage of change, this is called the preparation stage. This means that you acknowledge that you need additional support and that you're ready to prepare to secure your services. By this point, you believe that change is necessary and that the time for change is imminent. This may look like doing research on nearby organizations that you might be aware of that are for counseling or psychotherapy, or you might simply make a mental note or jot down a note to ask your medical provider during your next appointment, letting them know, I have been feeling some type of way lately, where I haven't been as productive as usual, or I feel like I may be experiencing some depression, some anxiety, or some PTSD for X, Y, and Z reasons. From there, your medical provider has the obligation to refer you to a mental health provider. So you can get services and support by simply speaking up at your medical appointment. For a lot of mental health services, you actually need a medical referral. For me, in my situation, that was definitely a must. I tried to get mental health services on my own, and I was informed that you're more than welcome to come to us for services. However, you're going to need that medical referral because we have to make sure you're in good physical health. Ambivalence is still very likely at this stage. If you've made it to the action stage, this basically means you're actively involved and taking the next steps you need to receive services. You've made contact with a organization of your choice. You're still going to experience some ambivalence during this stage as you prepare because it's the unknown. You may be feeling some anxiety about moving forward because it's out of the norm. And that's a huge accomplishment in and of itself, that you have actually taken action to get the extra support that you feel that you need. The fifth stage is the maintenance stage. This is considered one of the most important stages of the stages of change. You have made contact, you completed your intake appointment, you are regularly going to your weekly or bi-weekly counseling sessions, you are successfully avoiding temptation to abruptly end your therapy. You may not see the improvements you are potentially expecting, but you have committed to and understand counseling and therapy is a process, and change will take place over a period of time and not immediately. Every person and their needs are different. I expect to just go to a therapy appointment, have a 45-minute conversation, and expect that the therapist is going to solve all of your problems within that 45 minutes. The therapist has to know a lot more about what your experiences are, a lot more about what your symptoms are, what coping mechanisms, what defense mechanisms do you have up. All of these things need to be addressed so that the therapist can put the best treatment plan in place for you so that you are more likely to be successful throughout the therapy process. This is a very important stage for us to discuss. The last and final stage is called the relapse stage. During this stage, likely feel defeated. At this point, you have successfully made it through doing the research on the counseling and therapy that you need. You've actually made contact. Perhaps you've attended a couple of therapeutic sessions, and for whatever reason, you have decided to completely drop out, whether it's at your own free will or something in your life happens where you're not able to commit to the services, which is what I see a lot of parents saying that they don't have time for therapy because they have children, they have work. And what I say to that is, in order for you to be 110% for your child, you have to be 100% yourself. And I strongly encourage that if you do make it to the relapse stage, that you do not beat yourself up, that you take it in, you process what it is that brought you to this stage, you figure out what your trigger was for giving up. If you make it to the relapse stage, it's very important that you do not, and I repeat, you do not beat yourself up. Because if you've made it to the relapse stage, that means that rather than moving forward, you've kind of backtracked a little bit. And that's okay. That's a part of change. You grow, you learn, you make mistakes, and you keep pushing, you keep moving forward. Take a moment to process what the experience has been for you thus far. What were your triggers? What triggered you to not move forward? Whether it be something that was your personal decision or if it was something that was going on in your life. If there were any triggers, reflect on the entire experience as you went through the stages and figure out what it was that you liked about it, what didn't you like, and jot those down in your journal and figure out how you can move forward differently, knowing now that you have made contact, now that you have a better understanding of what getting mental health services looks like. Now sit back and reflect on what it is that you liked and what it is that you disliked about the process. Call back to the organization that you were going to, possibly speak to the therapist directly or the manager and let them know that you would like to re-engage in services And that could be something that you discuss when you interact with your therapist, which is the things that you didn't like about the process and what didn't you like. Your therapist will help you work through that and try to help you figure out different ways you can go about doing things that are helpful to you and that are not triggers for you. So some of you guys are already aware that with Melanin Meets Mental Health, I'm introducing different segments to promote Black business, Black artists, poets, and just people within our community trying to build their own brands and develop themselves. Our shout out today goes to the T-shirt Addict. This company is a small Black owned business who actually designed my T-shirt, Melanin Meets Mental Health. He also designed a Black version for me. As you can see, it's very glittery. You know, us girls, we love our glitter. You can see that it's legible. You can also see on the back that he put my Instagram page, and working with him, it just came out really well. It definitely met my expectations, and the experience working with the T-shirt Addict was really good. I'm not one to play when it comes to customer service. The process went very well. Communication was on point. If he had any questions or concerns, he would definitely reach out to me via text or giving me a phone call. If I had any questions or concerns or just simply wanted to make some adjustments to what had already been submitted, he was very open to receiving the information and making those adjustments. So he was very, very professional, and I loved working with him. So if you have your own business, if you have your own slogan, if you have anything that you would like to put on a T-shirt, perhaps a hat, so any T-shirt needs, any custom needs, the T-shirt Addict is the guy for you. So remember, I don't know who needs this, but I know somebody does. So if this information doesn't apply to you, and maybe you know a friend or a family member who may be struggling with mental health, who is unfamiliar with the process, the terminology, and just things of that nature, please share. If you have any topics in particular that you would like me to cover, please don't hesitate to ask. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Melanin Meets Mental Health. I'm Jasmine J, and I'll see you next week.